There is a particular kind of hope that only exists between people who used to love each other. It is different from ordinary hope. Ordinary hope looks forward. This kind looks sideways through time, through the thick glass of years and hurt and distance, at a face you once knew better than your own. I know about this kind of hope because I carried it for a very long time. Her name was Sandra. We had been friends since we were 9 years old. 57 years if you count from the beginning. And I did count. I counted every one of them. We grew up on the same street. We went to the same schools, got in the same kinds of trouble, held each other through the same kinds of grief that find you in your 20s and 30s. The bad marriages, the babies who came too early or too late, the parents who left before we were ready to let them go. We were not just friends. We were the kind of friends who are, in every way that matters, family. And then 20 years ago, Sandra told me something that changed everything I thought I knew about us. Not about our future. About our past. She told me something about our 37 years together that I had never known. Something she had been keeping quietly, carefully, for nearly 4 decades, like a stone in her pocket. Too heavy to throw away. Too heavy to keep carrying. Too familiar to quite remember was there. When she told me, I did not cry. I sat very still. I sat so still that she leaned forward and touched my hand and said, "Loretta, say something." I said, "How long have you known?" She said, "Always." That word, always, took 20 years to understand. But I am going to tell you the whole story. Not just the end of it. All of it. From the street where we grew up to the kitchen where it finally came apart and the long, honest way back to each other. Because the truth is not what I thought it would be. And forgiveness is not what I thought it would feel like. And sometimes the person you find when you find EAC. Other again is not the person you expected to meet. That I was 9 years old when Sandra Moore moved in 3 houses down from us on Clearwater Avenue. It was the summer of 1965, the summer that always smelled like cut grass and chlorine to me. The summer my mother had let me start walking to the community pool by myself for the first time. I was at the very beginning of the age when freedom starts to feel real. When the world starts to feel like it might actually belong to you someday. Sandra appeared in her front yard on a Tuesday with a red bicycle and no one to ride with. I had a bicycle too. Yellow. Mine was faster, I had decided, though I had no evidence for this. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment watching her, the way children assess each other at a distance before committing to anything. She looked up. "Do you know where the pool is?" "Yes." "Will you show me?" That was it. That was the whole beginning. We rode to the pool that afternoon, and we were, by the time we arrived, already deep in conversation about our respective theories on the best flavor of popsicle. She believed in grape. I believed in cherry. We argued about this for years, in the affectionate way of people who argue about things that don't matter, because the things that do matter have already been established. Sandra's family had moved to Columbus from Cleveland. Her father was an accountant, quiet and precise, the kind of man who wore a tie on Saturdays. Her mother was warm and loud, and cooked more food than any family could reasonably eat, and sent plates of it to neighbors with the regularity of a church offering. My family was different in almost every way, and the same in the ways that mattered. My father drove a delivery truck. My mother stayed home with my brother Paul and me and kept the house with the kind of devoted attention that is its own form of love. We were not a loud family. We were a careful family. We thought before we spoke and didn't always speak even after we'd thought. Sandra and I were, in some ways, the product of these different households meeting in the middle. She had her mother's directness and her father's precision. I had my family's carefulness. Between us, we covered most of the available territory of human personality. She was my best friend within a week of meeting her, which is the kind of thing that only happens at 9 years old. After 9, friendships need more time. They need to be built. But at 9 they can simply arrive. We went to the same middle school. We went to the same high school. We cried in each other's bedrooms over boys who were not worth crying over. We stayed up until 2 in the morning before our SATs, quizzing each other on vocabulary words neither of us would ever actually use. We went to different colleges. She went to Ohio State, I went to Kenyon. But we wrote letters. Long real letters. The kind that took time to write and time to read and arrived with a weight that meant something. We were in each other's weddings. I married Raymond when I was 26. Sandra married a man named Dennis a year later. Dennis was tall and quick-witted, and I liked him the way you like someone who is good to the person you love, not with any special feeling of your own, but with a particular gratitude. They had 2 children, a daughter named Kimberly and a son named Andrew. I had Clara and James. Our children grew up knowing each other the way cousins sometimes do. Not intimately, but with a familiarity that came from always being aware the other existed. For decades, Sandra and I lived the parallel lives of 2 women who are deeply connected across the geography of their separate existences. Different houses, different neighborhoods, eventually different cities for a stretch. She and Dennis moved to Cincinnati for 6 years in the 90s for his work, but a connection that never dropped below a certain depth no matter the distance. We talked on the phone constantly. We visited when we could. We were present for the major events of each other's lives. The deaths, the illnesses, the graduations, the grandchildren as they arrived. I trusted her with everything. Not in a dramatic, explicit way. Just in the ordinary, daily way of someone who has never had reason to do otherwise. That is the thing about a long friendship. Trust becomes ambient. You stop noticing it as a thing you're choosing because it has become simply the air the relationship breathes. You don't think about whether to trust someone you've known for 37 years. You just do. I should have thought about it. Not because Sandra was untrustworthy. She wasn't. But because every relationship, no matter how old or deep, holds the possibility of a truth that hasn't been spoken yet. And the older and deeper the relationship, the more room there has been for that truth to wait. Her truth had been waiting for a very long time. The years between 30 and 50 are full of the particular business of being alive in a way that leaves little room for looking closely at the things you've been taking for granted. You are raising children. You are managing careers. You are holding together households and marriages, and the 1,000 logistical threads that together make up a life. The deep friendships you have, the ones that have been running long enough to feel permanent, become part of the background. Not unimportant. Not unfelt. But ambient, the way furniture is ambient. Present in every room without requiring attention. Sandra and I were like that for many years. We knew each other so thoroughly that we had stopped being curious about each other in the surface-level way of newer friendships. We weren't asking each other discovery questions. We weren't being careful with each other's feelings in the way you are early on, when you don't yet know the exact contours of what someone can hear and what they can't. We had graduated into something past all of that. What I did not understand, in the years we were most comfortable with each other, is that comfort can have a shadow side. The shadow of comfort is assumption. The assumption that you know someone completely. The assumption that what they would tell you, they have told you. The assumption that silence, in a long relationship, means nothing rather than something. I assumed Sandra's silences were the silences of someone who had nothing to add to what had already been said between us. I did not think about what her silences might be containing. The year I turned 54 was the year that tested everything. Raymond was depressed in a way that had changed the texture of our whole house. The rooms that used to feel like ours had started to feel like his. Heavy with something invisible that I moved around carefully, the way you move around furniture in the dark. I was carrying it alone. Mostly. I had told Sandra something was going on, but not the full picture. Not yet. I was protecting Raymond's privacy the way you protect someone's privacy when you love them, and you know they would not want to be seen as fragile. But I was struggling. And around the same time, something began to happen that I didn't fully notice until later. Sandra started being different with me. I want to say something about how hard this is to describe, because the changes were so small. A slight hesitation before answering when I asked how she was. A careful quality to her questions about Raymond that I read, at the time, as delicacy. A tendency to redirect conversations that seemed to be heading towards something I couldn't name. I thought she was just busy. Dennis had retired and they were traveling more, and she had taken on a volunteer position at a hospital that was consuming a great deal of her time and energy. I actually thought this, that she was pulling back slightly because life was full and difficult to talk to anyone. But something was sitting in my chest that was heavier than that. What kind of talking? Sandra looked up. Loretta. What kind of talking, Sandra? Down at her hands, yes. I let that sit. There was something wrong with what she had said. Not the fact of it. Raymond talking to Sandra was not, by itself, a crisis. They liked each other. They had always gotten along. It was possible to imagine a scenario in which Raymond had found it easier to talk to my best friend than to me, for some of the same reasons I had found it. A long pause. She said. We were close. Closer than we should have been. Not, she stopped. She started again. Nothing physical. I want to be clear about that. But we were emotionally close in a way that wasn't right. We talked about things. Personal things. Things I know you would not have been comfortable with if you had known. And I am telling you now because I can't keep carrying it, and because you deserve to know, and because I am ashamed I let it go this long. I heard every word she said. I sat with them. Outside the window, a car passed. A dog barked somewhere down the street. The ordinary world going on in its ordinary way. How long? On and off. Starting about 15 years ago. 15 years. She had been carrying this for 15 years. Raymond had been carrying this for 15 years. And I had been sitting at this same kitchen table, drinking tea, trusting both of them for 15 years. Is it over? It has been for years. I promise you. It ended. It ended when I finally told myself I couldn't be your friend and do this. I chose you. I want you to know that. I stopped. I chose you. I thought about the word chose. I thought about what it meant to be chosen after the fact. To be the person someone selected, eventually, over the other thing they wanted. I didn't say anything for a very long time. And then I said, I need you to leave now. She did. The table was still set. Her cup was still half full. The coffee cake was still there, mostly uneaten. I sat in my kitchen alone for a very long time. I did not know what Raymond was carrying in those years. Or more honestly, I knew pieces of it and did not know the full shape. I knew he had difficult periods. Periods of deep quiet where he was present in body, and somewhere underwater in everything else. I had learned over the years to recognize the signs. I had learned to move around these periods. To be practical and present. To give him space. I thought this was love. I thought this was what you did for a person who was struggling. What I did not fully understand is that my moving around his struggles may have felt, to Raymond, like confirmation that his struggles were something to be worked around rather than worked through. That the practical management of his absence might have felt, from the inside, like a kind of distance. That the very efficiency with which I handled things might have communicated, I am not broken by this. I do not need you to bring this to me fully. I am not saying this to blame myself for what happened. I am saying it because it is part of the true picture, and the true picture is what I am committed to now. Here is what I want to tell you about the days after Sandra left my kitchen. I did not cry right away. I didn't cry for 2 days, actually. I moved through the house doing ordinary things with extraordinary care. I washed dishes that were already clean. I reorganized a kitchen cabinet that did not need reorganizing. I took long walks that were not so much walks as they were motion for the sake of motion, something to do with a body that didn't know what to do with what it was carrying. Raymond was home. He knew something was wrong. He could always tell when something was wrong, which is its own terrible irony. He asked me twice. I said I was tired. He said okay and gave me space the way he always did. I sat with the knowledge of what he had been and had not been and tried to figure out what I was going to do with it. I did not tell him what Sandra had told me. Not yet. Not for several days. I needed to understand what I felt before I said any of it out loud. Because here is what I discovered, alone in my kitchen and on my long unnecessary walks. My feelings were not what I expected them to be. I expected rage. I expected the clean, clarifying heat of betrayal. The kind that tells you exactly who you are and who wronged you and what to do next. But what I felt was more complicated than that. There was hurt. Of course there was hurt. 20 years of friendship and 15 years of a secret, and a husband who had found it easier to confide something important to my best friend than to me. That hurt in multiple directions at once. But underneath the hurt was something I had to sit with much longer to identify. It was grief. Not grief about what Sandra had done, though that was part of it. Grief about Raymond. About the man who had been struggling with something for so many years that he had needed to find a confidant outside our marriage. About the gap between us that I had not fully seen until this moment, The specific distance that must have existed for him to go looking for what he found in Sandra's willingness to listen. I thought about the last 15 years of my marriage. I thought about Raymond's episodes, the ones I had known about and the ones I hadn't, and about the quiet, careful distance he kept even in the middle of them. I had always thought that was privacy. I had always thought that was the way he was built, contained, protective of his interior life. But maybe it was something else. Maybe it was that he had found somewhere else to put what he couldn't bring to me. And I had to ask myself, quietly, honestly, in the way that requires. And I had to ask myself, quietly, honestly, in the way that requires. On the third day, I called my daughter Clara. Not to tell her everything. I would not do that to Raymond. But I told her I was going through something hard and I needed her voice, and she said, "I'm coming, Mom." And she was there by evening. She sat with me the way a daughter sits with a mother when the mother is broken and the daughter can't fix it but won't leave. She made me eat something. She put her arm around me on the couch. She didn't ask me to explain anything until I was ready. When I was finally ready, I told her some of it. Enough of it. Clara was quiet for a long time after I told her. Then she said, "Mom, what do you need? Not what's right, not what you're supposed to do. What do you actually need?" I thought about it. I need to understand how this happened. You mean with Sandra? Or with you and Dad? Both. Clara said slowly. Then you have to talk to both of them. I knew she was right. I talked to Raymond first. It was a Tuesday evening, 4 days after Sandra had left my kitchen. We sat at the kitchen table, and I told him what Sandra had told me. I want to describe what happened on Raymond's face when I said it. He didn't deny it. He looked at me for a long moment with an expression I had not seen before. Not guilt exactly, not shame exactly. Something more like exhaustion. Like a person who has been carrying a weight for so long that having it named out loud is, in some terrible way, a relief. I was going to tell you. When I understood it myself. Do you understand it now? I think I do. We talked for a long time that night. Not a fight. Nothing loud. Nothing that split the air. More like a long, painful conversation between two people who have decided that the truth, however hard, is the only thing that will actually help. He told me things I hadn't known. About the years of depression that predated what I knew about by a decade. About a loneliness years of depression that predated what I knew about by a decade. About a loneliness inside the illness that he had not known how to bring to me because he had believed, at some level, that it would frighten me, that I would not know what to do with a husband who was struggling in a way that had no clear solution. He had protected me, or tried to, from a truth he did not think I was strong enough to hold. I told him that what he had believed about me was wrong. Not angrily. Honestly. I could have held it. You didn't let me try. I know. And there it was. The thing underneath the thing. Not a betrayal exactly, though it was that too. Not a failure. Exactly, though it was that too. It was something more specific. A marriage in which two people had each, in their own way, protected the other from the full truth of themselves. And in doing so had left gaps between them that other things had moved into. Sandra had moved into one of those gaps. Not because she was a bad person, she wasn't. Not because Raymond was a bad person, he wasn't. But because gaps, when they exist for long enough, have a tendency to fill. I held Raymond responsible for his part. I held Sandra responsible for hers. But I also sat with my own responsibility. For the ways I had made it hard to reach me, for the efficiency and capability I had always worn like armor, for the times I had made clear, without meaning to, that I could handle everything and therefore didn't need to be burdened. None of this made what had happened acceptable. But it made it human. And understanding it as human was the only way to know what to do with it. There is a particular loneliness that can exist inside a functioning marriage. Not the loneliness of indifference or of genuine disconnection, but the loneliness of two people who love each other, and have somehow, through years of good intentions and small protections, built a little gap between them that neither one quite named. A gap made of all the things they each decided not to burden the other with. All the fears they kept quiet to avoid worrying each other. All the struggles they managed alone to avoid appearing incapable. Raymond and I had that gap. I did not see it clearly until Sandra forced me to look. I did not talk to Sandra for 6 months after that Sunday. She called. I didn't answer. Not out of punishment. I wasn't in the business of punishing people. But because I needed time to arrive at something honest before I could speak to her again. When I finally called her back, on a Tuesday evening in October, she answered on the first ring. I'm ready to talk. I'll come over. She came over. And we had the hardest conversation I have ever had in my life. Sandra sat across from me at my kitchen table again. It was a different kind of sitting than the last time. That time she had arrived with something to confess, and I had been receiving. This time we were both carrying things, and we both knew it. And the table between us felt like something neutral. Not a battlefield, not a refuge, just a surface to put things on. I had prepared what I wanted to say. Not rehearsed. I never did well with rehearsed. But prepared in the sense of having sat with it long enough to know what was true. I am angry at you. I know. Not primarily for what you told me. For the 15 years you didn't tell me. I know. You sat with me at this table and at every other table for 15 years, and you were carrying this, and I was trusting you. And you let me trust you while knowing you had done something that would have mattered to that trust. Sandra looked at her hands. Yes. I need to know why. Not why it happened. I think I understand something about why it happened. I mean why you didn't tell me. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, because I was afraid of losing you. You were afraid of losing me. So you kept a secret that was costing me the full truth of my own life. I know how that sounds. How does it sound? It sounds like I was protecting myself. Not you. Yes. She nodded. Then she said, I could tell you that I also didn't tell you because I believed it was over, and I believed no lasting harm had been done. And I thought that telling you would only cause pain that didn't need to be caused. I thought that. And I also know that those were things I told myself to make it easier not to tell the truth. Both things are true. I sat with that. There is a particular quality of honesty that arrives when someone stops defending themselves and simply describes what they did and why. It is not comfortable to receive. But it is the only kind of honesty that does anything useful. Sandra, I have been thinking about this for 6 months. About you and about Raymond, and about what happened between all of us and why. She looked up. And I am not excusing anything. I want to be clear. But I think I made it hard to be fully honest with me. I think I was someone who handled everything and had everything managed, and I think that made it harder for people to bring me the full weight of what they were going through. Raymond felt that. You felt it too, I think. Sandra's eyes had filled. You were never cold. That's not what I mean. I know. But there's a kind of strength that can be its own kind of closed door. Yes. We sat with that together. I don't know if I can go back to what we were. I honestly don't know if the friendship we had is something I can inhabit again without feeling the weight of all of this every time. I understand. But I also know that throwing away 57 years of something real, because of 15 years of something wrong, is not a decision I want to make from where I am right now. Not from the anger. What do you want to make it from? From honesty. From understanding. From seeing you clearly. All of you. Not the version I had for 57 years, and not the version this moment makes you. From the full, complicated REA. Sandra cried then. Not dramatically. Quietly. The way she cried, with her hand over her mouth and her eyes closed. I don't know if I deserve that. Maybe not. But I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for the 57 years. For the 9-year-old with the red bicycle. For everything we built. I am not ready to let all of that be defined only by this. We talked for a long time after that. We talked about what had happened. More of it, the part Sandra had not said the first time. The fuller picture of how something begins and how it ends and what it costs. We talked about Raymond. What I had understood since, what his and my marriage looked like now, which I will tell you is changed but not broken. Raymond and I had done the harder work first, the work of being honest with each other in the ways we hadn't been. And what remained between us, stripped of the protections we'd each worn, was real and worn in and worth keeping. Raymond and I spent more time talking in the year after Sandra's confession than we had in the previous 5 years combined. Not fighting. Not recriminating. Talking. About the things we had each been carrying alone. About the ways we had each managed to be present and absent simultaneously. about the particular marriage we had built, and the things it had and the things it had lacked. It was the hardest year of our marriage. It was also, in ways I did not expect, the most honest. Clara noticed the change in us. She came to dinner one evening in the fall, about 8 months after the conversation, and afterward she pulled me aside and said, "Mom, you and Dad seem different." "Different how?" "More like you're actually talking to each other." "We always talked." "I know, but this is different. It's like you're both actually there." Being actually there. That was what the truth had done. Brutal and unwanted as it was, it had forced both Raymond and me to be fully present with each other rather than the careful, managed versions we'd been presenting. It had removed the architecture of protection we'd been living inside, and shown us the actual space. The actual space was smaller than the managed version. Less impressive. More frightening. But it was ours. Sandra and I did not hug when she left that night. But when she reached the door and looked back, I said, "I'll call you." "Okay. Give me time." "I'll give you all the time you need." She left. I stood in my kitchen. The light was on over the sink and the house was quiet, and I stood there for a while with all of it, with the full, complicated weight of 57 years, and what it meant that I was still standing there, still willing, still able to say, "Give me time." That night I called Clara. I talked to her. "How do you feel?" I thought about it for a moment. Truly thought about it. "Like I'm carrying less than I was this morning." "That's something, Mom." "Yeah, I think it is." Sandra and I talk now. Not the way we did. Not yet, maybe not ever quite that way again. But we talk. On Tuesdays, sometimes. The conversations are more careful than they used to be. More deliberate. Less assumed. In some ways that carefulness is a loss. In other ways it feels like the most honest thing we have ever done. It has been 2 years since that afternoon in my kitchen when Sandra told me the truth she had been carrying. 2 years of understanding and not understanding. Of Raymond and I learning to be more honest with each other than we were before, which is a different kind of marriage. More transparent, less protected, not easier but more real. Of Sandra and I building something that does not yet have the ease of what we had before but has, instead, the particular solidity of something that has been tested and survived. I have been thinking, in these 2 years, about what the truth actually does. I used to be. That truth was something you owed people. That telling the truth was primarily about the other person's right to know. And it is that. But it is also something else. The truth is the only way two people can find each other in the full. Not the version of you that's managed and composed. Not the version of me that handles everything and doesn't need. The real version. The one that has made mistakes and has fears and has sometimes chosen the easier thing over the right thing. When Sandra finally told me the truth after 15 years, she handed me the real version of herself. It was not a gift. It did not feel like one. But it was real. And in receiving it, in choosing to stay in the conversation rather than simply walking away, I received something I had not had before. The full picture. And you cannot truly forgive a partial picture. You can forgive a caricature, an idea of someone, a simplified version of events. But real forgiveness, the kind that changes something in you, requires the full truth of what you are forgiving. I did not forgive Sandra quickly. I am still, if I am honest, in the process of forgiving her completely. Forgiveness is not a door you walk through once. It is more like a practice. Something you return to. Something you keep choosing. But I am choosing it. And here is what I want to say to anyone who is carrying a truth they haven't told yet. The weight of it does not stay the same over time. It grows. And the longer you carry it, the more it costs not just you but everyone around you. The people who love you, who trust you, who are making decisions about their lives based on a picture that is missing important information. The truth is not always the kindest thing in the moment. But it is always kinder, in the end, than its absence. Sandra told me the truth finally, because she was tired of carrying it, and because she loved me enough to risk losing me rather than keep me in a false version of our friendship. That courage delayed. As it was, imperfect as it was, matters to me. It is the thing I hold on to when the forgiveness is hard. She loved me enough to tell me, even after 15 years, even at the cost of everything. That is not nothing. That is actually quite a lot.